Queen Zarathin stood before the assembled council of the Galactic Federation, her crystalline skin shimmering under the harsh lights of the diplomatic chamber. Her 4 arms moved gracefully as she addressed the representatives from dozens of worlds, but her 6 eyes focused with particular disdain on the small human delegation seated at the far end of the curved table. "The data speaks for itself," she declared, her melodious voice carrying an edge of superiority. "The Zarathi reproduce through careful genetic selection and controlled breeding programs. One coupling produces dozens of offspring, each genetically optimized for their predetermined role in society. Meanwhile, these humans—" She paused, letting the word drip with condescension. "They produce 1, perhaps 2 offspring at a time. Their reproductive cycle is laughably inefficient." Ambassador Chen maintained his composure, though his jaw tightened slightly. Beside him, Captain Marcus Wright of the Earth Defense Force remained perfectly still, his dark eyes never leaving the Queen's face. Zarathin continued her presentation, holographic displays showing comparative biological data between various species. "The Zarathi Empire spans 300 systems because we understand the fundamental truth of survival. Efficient reproduction coupled with genetic superiority. Humans barely managed to colonize a dozen worlds before joining our federation. Their biological limitations are evident." "Your Majesty," Ambassador Chen finally spoke, rising from his seat, "humanity's strength has never been in numbers alone. We adapt, we persevere, and we—" "Spare us your species-tired mantras," Zarathin interrupted, her upper arms waving dismissively while her lower ones remained clasped. "Adaptation means nothing when you cannot even ensure your survival through proper breeding. Your females carry young for 9 months to produce a single offspring. Zarathi queens can produce 100 warriors in the same time frame." The meeting continued for hours, discussing trade agreements and territorial disputes, but the tension between the human delegation and the Zarathi queen remained palpable. When the session finally ended, Captain Wright lingered as the other delegates filed out. "Something you wish to add, Captain?" Zarathin asked, her tone suggesting she expected him to protest her earlier comments. Marcus approached slowly, his military bearing evident in every step. "I was wondering, Your Majesty, if you've ever considered that there might be more to reproduction than mere numbers." She laughed, a sound like crystal chimes. "Spoken like a member of a dying species. What could humans possibly understand about genetic superiority that the Zarathi have not mastered over millennia?" "Perhaps nothing," Marcus admitted, moving closer. "Or perhaps everything. You see, Your Majesty, humans don't just reproduce. We connect, we bond. Every child is precious because they're rare." "Weakness disguised as philosophy," she scoffed, though something in his steady gaze made her skin shimmer with an unfamiliar pattern. Over the following weeks, circumstances repeatedly brought them together. A malfunction in the station's environmental systems required cooperation between Earth and Zarathi engineers. Pirates attacked a supply convoy, forcing their military forces to work in tandem. Each interaction brought more debates, more verbal sparring between the Queen who believed in genetic perfection and the human who spoke of something deeper. "You're an enigma, Captain Wright," Zarathin admitted one evening as they reviewed defense protocols in her private office. The room was designed to accommodate her species' preference for crystalline surfaces and refracted light, creating rainbow patterns across every surface. "How so?" Marcus asked, not looking up from the tactical display. "You defend your species' biological inferiority as if it were a strength. You speak of bonds and connections as if they matter more than survival itself." She moved around the desk, all 4 arms gesturing expressively. "Yet you're one of your military's most decorated officers. You've survived battles that should have killed a dozen humans." "Maybe that's the point," Marcus said, finally meeting her eyes. "Humans don't survive because we're the strongest or breed the fastest. We survive because we have something to survive for. Sentiment, she said, but the word lacked its usual bite. Purpose, he corrected. The conversation shifted to the upcoming joint military exercise, but something had changed in the dynamic between them. Zarathin found herself studying the human captain when she thought he wasn't looking. His species aged so quickly compared to hers. She could see the faint lines around his eyes, the few silver strands in his dark hair. By Zarathi standards, he was already approaching middle age, yet he carried himself with a vitality that puzzled her. The joint exercise took place in the neutral zone, a section of space between Federation borders used for training and diplomatic meetings. Zarathi warriors, bred for combat and enhanced with the finest genetic modifications, worked alongside human marines, who seemed almost fragile by comparison. "Your soldiers are performing admirably," Zarathin admitted, as she and Marcus observed from the command ship. "They usually do," Marcus replied, "especially when they have something to prove." She turned to him, her 6 eyes narrowing. "You mean my comments in the council chamber? You told them—" "I didn't have to. The entire human contingent knows about your speech. They're not angry, Your Majesty. They're motivated." The exercise continued, and to Zarathin's surprise, the human forces consistently outmaneuvered their Zarathi counterparts in strategic scenarios. Where her warriors relied on their superior physical capabilities and predetermined tactical knowledge, the humans adapted, improvised, and overcame. "How?" she demanded after watching a squad of humans successfully defend a position against a force 3 times their size. "Because each of those soldiers knows that if they fall, they can't be easily replaced," Marcus explained. "Every human life is precious because it's rare. That makes us careful, creative, and absolutely determined not to waste the gift we've been given." That night, Zarathin found herself unable to enter her regenerative trance. Her mind kept replaying the day's events, analyzing the human approach to combat, to life, to everything. She had ruled her people for 2 centuries, had seen the rise and fall of dozens of species, but these humans confounded her expectations at every turn. She found Marcus in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars. The room was empty, save for them, the vast transparency of the viewport making it seem as if they stood in space itself. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked without turning. "Zarathi don't sleep. We enter regenerative trances." She moved to stand beside him, her reflection in the viewport showing all 6 eyes focused on his profile. "But yes, I found myself restless. Second thoughts about human inferiority? Questions," she admitted. "My entire life has been dedicated to the perpetuation and improvement of the Zarathi genome. Every decision I make is calculated to ensure our species' dominance for the next 1,000 generations. Yet you humans, with your chaotic breeding and emotional attachments, continue to survive and even thrive. It defies logic." Marcus turned to face her fully. "Maybe that's because you're trying to apply the wrong kind of logic. You see reproduction as a manufacturing process. We see it as something more." "Explain," she commanded, though her tone was softer than usual. "When a human couple decides to have a child, they're not thinking about genetic optimization or species survival. They're thinking about love, about creating something new and unique, about adding to the story of humanity in their own small way." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Every human child is a gamble, a roll of cosmic dice. We don't know what they'll become, what they'll contribute. That uncertainty is terrifying and beautiful." "Chaos," Zarathin murmured. "Potential," Marcus countered. They stood in silence for a while, watching stars wheel slowly past. Finally, Zarathin spoke again. "In 200 years of rule, I have produced over 10,000 offspring. Each was designed for a specific purpose, their genetics crafted to serve the Empire's needs. I can recite their designations, their assignments, their efficiency ratings, but I cannot tell you a single personal detail about any of them." The admission seemed to surprise her as much as it did Marcus. He saw something in her expression shift, a vulnerability that her crystalline features couldn't quite hide. "That sounds lonely," he said simply. "Loneliness is irrelevant to a Zarathi queen. I exist to serve my species' continuation." The words were rote, automatic, but they rang hollow in the empty lounge. "What about you?" Marcus asked. "Not the queen, not the genetic template for your species' future, just Zarathin. What do you want?" She turned to him sharply, all 6 eyes wide. "No one has ever asked me that before. In 2 centuries, not once. I'm asking now." The conversation that followed lasted until the artificial dawn cycle began. They talked about philosophy, about the nature of existence, about the dreams and fears that transcended species boundaries. Zarathin found herself sharing thoughts she had never voiced, admitting doubts about the rigid structure of Zarathi society that would have been treasonous from anyone else. "Your species fascinates me," she finally admitted, as crew members began filtering into the lounge for the morning shift. "You should be extinct by every metric we use to judge survival fitness, yet you persist. More than that, you seem to find joy in your imperfection." "We call it being human," Marcus said with a slight smile. "It's messy, inefficient, and absolutely worth it." Their duties called them away, but the conversation had fundamentally shifted something between them. In the days that followed, they found excuses to meet, to continue their debates and discussions. Zarathin began to see human weakness as something else entirely, a different kind of strength that her species had perhaps overlooked in their quest for perfection. The real change came during a diplomatic crisis on Kepler Station. A radical faction of the Vorth Collective had taken hostages, demanding the Federation cede mineral-rich systems to their control. Among the hostages were both human and Zarathi civilians, including several younglings from the station's educational facility. "We could storm the compound," General Crackstor of the Zarathi military suggested during the emergency meeting. "Acceptable losses would be approximately 30% of the hostages, but we would eliminate the threat." "Unacceptable," Marcus said immediately. "Those are children in there." "They are genetic resources," Crackstor corrected. "Their loss would be regrettable but not catastrophic. We can produce more." The argument that erupted nearly came to blows before Zarathin intervened. "Enough. Captain Wright, what does humanity propose?" Marcus outlined a plan that seemed impossible, a careful infiltration using both human creativity and Zarathi physical capabilities, designed to extract every hostage without a single casualty. It required perfect timing, absolute trust between species that had been at odds just weeks before, and a level of individual initiative that Zarathi training typically discouraged. "It's madness," Crackstor declared. "It's human," Zarathin said slowly, "and perhaps that's exactly what we need." The operation was a success. Every hostage was retrieved alive, the Vorth radicals were captured without a single fatality, and the cooperation between human and Zarathi forces became a model for future joint operations. But for Zarathin, the real revelation came when she saw the human soldiers reuniting the rescued children with their families. The emotion, the tears, the desperate embraces. It was unlike anything in Zarathi society. Her own people collected their younglings with clinical efficiency, checking for damage and calculating rehabilitation requirements. The humans acted as if they had recovered treasures beyond price. "Now, do you understand?" Marcus asked, finding her in the aftermath. "I'm beginning to," she admitted. "Your species' strength isn't despite your emotional connections. It's because of them." That night, she summoned him to her private chambers. The room was a marvel of Zarathi architecture, with walls that could shift between opacity and transparency, showing either the stars outside or reflecting light in patterns that created a sense of infinite space. "I owe you an apology," she said without preamble. "My comments in the council chamber were born of ignorance and arrogance." "You spoke from your understanding of the universe," Marcus replied diplomatically. "My understanding was flawed." She moved closer, her forearms expressing what her words could not. "These past weeks have shown me that there are forms of strength the Zarathi have never considered. Your species' approach to life, to reproduction, to meaning itself, it's not inferior, it's simply different." "Different can be good," Marcus said, very aware of how close she stood. "Yes," she agreed, her voice dropping to harmonics he had never heard before. "Different can be intriguing." The weeks following the Kepler Station incident brought unprecedented cooperation between Earth and the Zarathi Empire. Joint training exercises became regular occurrences, scientific exchanges flourished, and the two species began to understand each other in ways that had seemed impossible just months before. At the center of this transformation were Queen Zarathin and Captain Marcus Wright, whose public debates had evolved into private conversations that lasted long into the night cycles. Zarathin found herself anticipating these meetings with an emotion she couldn't quite categorize. It wasn't the clinical interest she felt when reviewing genetic profiles or the satisfaction of successful negotiations. This was something warmer, more uncertain, and entirely outside her experience. "You're distracted," her advisor, Thexara, observed during a routine genetic review session. "The breeding protocols for the next generation require your attention, yet your mind seems elsewhere." "The protocols can wait," Zarathin said, surprising them both. In 2 centuries, she had never delayed a breeding review. "Your Majesty, the optimal window for genetic combination is—" "I said they can wait." She stood, her crystalline skin flickering with patterns that Thexara had never seen before. "Tell me, advisor, have you ever questioned our methods? Question the accumulated wisdom of 10,000 years of Zarathi evolution?" "Never, Your Majesty." "Perhaps that's our limitation," Zarathin murmured, moving to the viewing port that overlooked the station's human quarter. Below, she could see families in the public gardens, children playing while parents watched. Such inefficiency, yet such contentment. Her communicator chimed. Marcus was requesting her presence in the Cultural Exchange Center. She found herself moving toward the door before consciously deciding to go. The Cultural Exchange Center was Marcus's latest initiative, a space where humans and Zarathi could share their respective traditions. Today, he was teaching a group of young Zarathi workers about human music, something that had no equivalent in their society. "Music serves no evolutionary purpose," one of the younglings stated. "It produces no offspring, generates no resources, advances no strategic objectives." "You're absolutely right," Marcus agreed, his fingers moving over an ancient instrument called a piano. "It's completely useless by those metrics, and yet—" He played a simple melody, the notes floating through the air like audible mathematics. "It makes us feel. It connects us. It says things we don't have words for." Zarathin watched from the doorway as the younglings listened with growing fascination. Their crystalline forms began to resonate slightly with the vibrations, creating harmonics that complemented the melody. Marcus noticed and smiled, adapting his playing to incorporate their natural frequencies. "You're teaching them to be inefficient," Zarathin said when the session ended and the younglings had departed. "I'm teaching them to be more than the sum of their genetic programming," Marcus replied, still seated at the piano. "Would you like to try?" "I am a queen. I don't play." "No, you rule, you breed, you perpetuate. But what do you do for joy?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Slowly, as if moving against her own nature, Zarathin approached the instrument. Her 4 hands were not designed for human interfaces, but Marcus guided her, showing her how to adapt her physiology to create sound. The first note she struck resonated through her entire being in a way that was almost alarming. "It's just vibration in atmosphere," she said, but her voice carried wonder. "Everything is vibration when you reduce it enough," Marcus said, his hand still resting lightly on one of hers. "The difference is in how we choose to experience it." They spent hours at the piano, and for the first time in her centuries of existence, Zarathin created something that served no purpose except to exist. The music was imperfect, halting, a chaos of human design and Zarathi interpretation. It was beautiful. "I should return to my duties," she said eventually, though she made no move to leave. "Should you?" Marcus asked. "Or is that just what you've always done? You're a dangerous influence, Captain Wright. You make me question everything I've built my existence upon." "Good," he said simply. "Questions are how we grow." That night, Zarathin did something unprecedented. She canceled her genetic review sessions indefinitely and instructed her staff not to disturb her unless the Empire itself was threatened. Then she returned to her chambers and attempted to recreate the melodies Marcus had taught her, using crystalline formations that resonated at specific frequencies. The next morning, she found him in the Military Tactical Center, reviewing defensive positions along the Federation's border with hostile space. "I composed something," she announced without preamble, producing a small crystal that glowed with internal light. "It's crude by your standards, but—" Marcus took the crystal, and when he touched it, music filled the air. Not human music, not quite, but something that bridged the gap between their species. It was mathematical in its precision, yet emotional in its progression, a perfect fusion of Zarathi structure and human heart. "It's incredible," he said softly. "You created this in one night?" "I couldn't stop," she admitted. "Once I understood that creation didn't need to serve efficiency, it was as if something inside me had been waiting centuries to express itself." Their eyes met, and something passed between them that transcended species, rank, or rational thought. Marcus set the crystal carefully aside and stepped closer. "Zarathin," he began, but she interrupted. "I know what you're going to say, that this is impossible, that I am Zarathi and you are human, that our biologies are incompatible, our lifespans disparate, our roles in our respective societies." "I was going to say that you're beautiful," Marcus said simply. "Not just physically, though you are, but watching you discover joy, seeing you question and grow and become more than what you were programmed to be. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed." Her crystalline skin shifted through a spectrum of colors he had never seen before, patterns that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. "We shouldn't," she whispered, but she didn't step away. "Probably not," he agreed, reaching up to touch her face. Her skin was cool, smooth, unlike anything human, yet somehow perfect. But then again, humans have never been good at doing only what we should. What happened next defied xenobiological projections and rational thought. Two beings from species separated by light years of evolution and millennia of different development discovered that some connections transcend physical form. Their first kiss was awkward, a negotiation between different anatomies and expectations. Their second was better. By the third, they had found a rhythm that was uniquely theirs. "This changes everything," Zarathin said later, as they stood together in her chambers, watching binary stars dance around each other in the visible distance. "Does it?" Marcus asked. "Or does it just reveal what was already changing?" She turned in his arms, all 6 eyes focusing on his face. "My people will never accept this." "A queen who consorts with another species, who sets aside breeding protocols for love?" he suggested gently. We don't have a concept for that in Zarathi society. The closest translation would be inefficient attachment disorder. Marcus laughed, and after a moment, Zarathin joined him. The sound of a Zarathi queen laughing was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, something so rare that it had been heard perhaps a dozen times in their recorded history. Then maybe it's time to expand your vocabulary, he said. Their relationship, impossible to hide in the closed environment of the station, became the subject of intense speculation and debate. Some saw it as the ultimate symbol of human Zarathi cooperation. Others, particularly among the more traditional elements of both societies, viewed it as an abomination. You're risking everything, Ambassador Chen warned Marcus during a private meeting. Your career, possibly your life. The Zarathi hardliners are already calling for her removal. And what about her? Marcus asked. She's risking far more than I am. Her throne, her legacy, everything she was created to be. Is it worth it? Marcus thought about Zarathin's laugh, about the wonder in her eyes when she created music, about the way she had begun to see the universe through a lens of possibility rather than mere efficiency. Yes, he said simply. It is. Meanwhile, Zarathin faced her own challenges. The Council of Progenitors, the ancient body that oversaw Zarathi breeding programs, demanded her immediate return to the homeworld. You have corrupted yourself, Progenitor Vargoth declared during a holo-conference. Consorting with lesser species, abandoning your genetic duties, creating frivolous vibration patterns. You are no longer fit to bear the title of queen. Perhaps not, Zarathin replied calmly. But I am more myself than I have ever been. You are nothing but your genetics, Vargoth roared. You exist to perpetuate perfection. I exist, she corrected, to live. It took a human to teach me the difference. The conference ended with threats and ultimatums, but Zarathin felt strangely at peace. For the first time in 2 centuries, she was making choices based on desire rather than duty. That night, she and Marcus walked through the station's arboretum, a vast space that recreated environments from dozens of worlds. They stopped in the Earth section, surrounded by oak trees and wildflowers that had somehow survived humanity's journey to the stars. They want me to return, she said, to submit to genetic cleansing and resume my programmed function. Will you? She plucked a flower, examining its chaotic structure. These organisms serve no efficient purpose. They exist simply to exist, to add beauty to the world, to make seeds that might or might not survive. She turned to him. I used to think that was madness. Now I think it might be the sanest approach to existence I've encountered. That doesn't answer my question. No, she agreed. I won't go back. I can't. Not after learning what it means to truly live. Marcus pulled her close, and she marveled again at how natural it felt despite their differences. His warmth, his heartbeat, the way his presence made her crystalline structure harmonize in patterns she had never experienced. It all felt like coming home to a place she had never known existed. There will be consequences, he warned. I'm counting on it, she said, surprising them both with her fierce determination. The Zarathi have stagnated in our supposed perfection. Maybe it's time we learned from humanity's chaos. Their relationship deepened in the weeks that followed. Marcus introduced her to human concepts she had never considered. Not just love, but humor, spontaneity, the joy of doing something simply because you wanted to. In return, she shared with him the deep mathematics of existence as the Zarathi understood it, the patterns underlying reality that her species had mapped over millennia. You see the universe as poetry, she told him one night as they watched a nebula birth new stars. We see it as equations, but perhaps both are true. Or perhaps the truth is in the intersection, Marcus suggested. The poetry of equations, the mathematics of emotion. It was during one of these philosophical discussions that Zarathin first noticed the change. Her crystalline matrix, usually so predictable in its patterns, had begun displaying configurations she didn't recognize. At first, she attributed it to the emotional upheaval of recent months, but as the patterns grew more complex and persistent, an impossible suspicion began to form. She ran discreet scans in her private medical suite, not trusting even her most loyal attendants with this investigation. The results defied everything she knew about xenobiology. According to every principle of Zarathi science, what she was seeing was impossible. Cross-species reproduction between Zarathi and humans wasn't just unlikely, it was physically, genetically, fundamentally impossible. Yet the scans didn't lie. Deep within her crystalline matrix, something new was growing, something that pulsed with a rhythm that was neither fully Zarathi nor fully human, but wondrously, impossibly, both. She stared at the results for hours, her mind racing through implications that threatened to reshape everything she understood about life itself. How could this be? Their species had evolved on different worlds, under different stars, with completely different biological foundations. The Zarathi reproduced through carefully controlled crystalline matrix divisions. Humans through mammalian biological processes that seemed almost primitive by comparison. There was no point of compatibility, no possible interface between their reproductive systems. And yet, she thought about all the impossible things that had happened since meeting Marcus. The way his presence affected her crystalline harmonics. The emotions he had awakened that her species had no names for. The music they created together that shouldn't exist. Perhaps impossibility was just another limitation to transcend. When Marcus found her hours later, she was still staring at the scan results, her entire form flickering through patterns of shock, wonder, and something that might have been joy. "Zara? What's wrong?" She turned to him, all 6 eyes wide with an expression he had never seen before. "Marcus," she said slowly, "I believe we need to discuss something that our respective species would consider impossible. More impossible than a human and a Zarathi queen falling in love? Infinitely more so," she said, taking his hands in all 4 of hers. "Marcus, I'm carrying our child." The silence that followed seemed to stretch across galaxies. Marcus stared at her, then at the scan results, then back at her. His mouth opened and closed several times without producing sound. How is that possible?" he finally managed. "It shouldn't be," she admitted. "By every law of science both our species understand. It absolutely should not be possible. But the evidence is undeniable." Marcus sank into a chair, his mind clearly struggling to process this information. A child. Our child. A human Zarathi hybrid. The first of its kind in the known universe, Zarathin confirmed. "I don't know what this means, Marcus. I don't know if it will survive, what it will be, how it will exist. Our biologies are so different." "But compatible enough, apparently," Marcus said, a note of wonder creeping into his voice. He stood, moving to her side to examine the scans more closely. "Look at these patterns. It's like it's creating its own biological rules." "Adapting," Zarathin breathed. "Taking what it needs from both genetic templates and creating something entirely new." They stared at each other, the full magnitude of their situation settling over them like a cosmic weight. This changed everything, not just for them, but potentially for both their species. The impossible had become possible, and with it came questions that no one had ever thought to ask. The news of Zarathin's pregnancy could not be contained for long. In a society where every Zarathi birth was meticulously planned and recorded, the Queen's unauthorized condition sent shockwaves through the empire. What started as whispers in the corridors of power soon became a roar that reached across star systems. Marcus stood beside Zarathin as she faced the emergency session of the Galactic Federation Council. Every seat was filled, with representatives from species across the known galaxy gathered to witness what many were calling either a miracle or an abomination. "This is unprecedented," the Vorth ambassador clicked, his mandibles expressing extreme agitation. "Cross-species reproduction of this nature violates the natural order." "The natural order?" Zarathin's voice rang clear through the chamber. "The natural order once said that life could only exist on planets with specific conditions. Then we found extremophiles thriving in conditions that would kill most organisms. The natural order said faster-than-light travel was impossible until someone proved otherwise. Perhaps it's time we stopped using nature as an excuse for our limitations." Progenitor Vargoth materialized as a massive hologram, his crystalline form radiating disapproval. "You dare speak of limitations? You have contaminated the Zarathi genome with alien influence. You carry an abomination that should not exist." "I carry a child," Zarathin corrected, her hand moving protectively over her midsection, where the impossible life grew. "My child. And if you think I will allow any harm to come to it, you understand nothing of what I have become." "What you have become is human." Vargoth spat the word like a curse. "Emotional, irrational, weak." "Strong enough to stand here," Marcus interjected, stepping forward. "Strong enough to face the fear and hatred of those who cannot accept that the universe might be bigger than their understanding." Ambassador Chen rose from the human delegation. "Earth stands with Captain Wright and Queen Zarathin. What they have created together represents not contamination, but evolution. Not weakness, but a strength neither species could achieve alone." The debate raged for hours. Scientists presented data showing the theoretical impossibility of human Zarathi reproduction. Theologians from various species argued about the implications for their understanding of life itself. Military leaders worried about the precedent of such genetic mixing. Through it all, Zarathin stood firm, her crystalline form shifting through patterns of determination that Marcus had learned to read. When she occasionally wavered, he would brush his hand against one of hers, a small gesture of support that somehow gave her strength. "You speak of impossibility," she finally said when the arguments had exhausted themselves. "Yet here I stand, carrying proof that our understanding of possibility is limited. This child exists. That is not theory or philosophy, it is fact. The question now is whether we will embrace this expansion of what life can be or cling to our fear of the unknown." The vote was close, closer than Marcus had hoped, but in the end, the Federation voted to recognize the legitimacy of Zarathin's pregnancy and provide protection for both parents and child. The Zarathi delegation walked out in protest, Vargoth's hologram dissipating with a promise of consequences. In the weeks that followed, Zarathin's condition became the most studied pregnancy in galactic history. Scientists from dozens of species requested access, trying to understand how two incompatible biologies had managed to create new life. The scans showed something remarkable. The child wasn't simply a blend of human and Zarathi traits, but something entirely new. Its developing form showed crystalline structures that could process information like a Zarathi, but with the adaptability and neural plasticity of a human. It was creating its own rules, its own way of existing. "It's perfect," Dr. Sarah Chen, Earth's leading xenobiologist, breathed as she studied the latest scans. "Not perfect in the Zarathi sense of optimized function, but perfect in its ability to be whatever it needs to be." "A child of possibility," Zarathin murmured, watching the small form move within her crystalline matrix. The sensation was unlike anything in Zarathi experience. Not the ordered development of a predetermined genetic template, but something wild and unpredictable and alive. Marcus rarely left her side now, especially after the first assassination attempt. A Zarathi purist had infiltrated the station, intent on ending what they saw as an affront to their species. Marcus had detected the threat, his human intuition picking up on subtle cues that Zarathi security had missed. The attempt failed, but it made clear that not everyone celebrated their impossible child. "I'm frightened," Zarathin admitted one night, a confession that would have been unthinkable for a Zarathi queen months ago. "Not of the danger to myself, but for our child. What kind of life will it have? Belonging fully to neither world, accepted by neither species." "Belonging to both," Marcus corrected gently. "Accepted by those who matter, and teaching others that the boundaries between us were always more illusion than reality." She turned to him, all 6 eyes reflecting the starlight from the viewport. "How can you have such faith?" "Because I've seen what impossible things love can create," he said simply. "It brought us together. It created new life where none should exist. It's changing 2 civilizations just by being. If that's not worth having faith in, what is?" The assassination attempts increased, coming from both human and Zarathi extremists. But so did the support. Messages poured in from across the galaxy. From scientists excited by the implications, from young Zarathi questioning their rigid society for the first time, from humans who saw in this child hope for a future beyond the limitations of biology. The birth, when it came, defied all predictions. Zarathi births were typically precise affairs, timed to the microsecond. Human births were notoriously unpredictable. True to its nature, the child chose its own path. Zarathin was in the middle of a diplomatic meeting when the process began. Her crystalline matrix suddenly shifted, patterns cascading across her form in ways that made every Zarathi in the room step back in alarm. "It's time," she gasped, reaching for Marcus. What followed was neither a human birth nor a Zarathi emergence, but something entirely unique. The child didn't simply separate from Zarathin's matrix. It seemed to sing its way into existence, its form resonating at frequencies that made every crystal in the medical bay hum in harmony. Marcus held Zarathin's hands as she guided their child into the universe, her voice joining the harmonic cascade in a song that had never existed before. When it was over, when the harmonics settled and the crystals stopped resonating, a small form lay in the specialized cradle they had prepared. It was beautiful in its impossibility, partially crystalline like its mother, but with the soft features of humanity. Its eyes, when they opened, showed irises that shifted between colors like living prisms. "Hello, little one," Zarathin whispered, her voice carrying harmonics of pure joy. "Welcome to the universe." Marcus reached out tentatively, and the child's tiny hand grasped his finger. The grip was strong, stronger than a human infant's should be, but gentle too. As they watched, patterns of light danced beneath the child's skin, some crystalline like Zarathin's, others following pathways that seemed almost organic. "What do we name it?" Marcus asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Something new," Zarathin decided. "Something that belongs to neither language, but encompasses both." They called the child Harmony. The reaction across the galaxy was immediate and intense. Some saw Harmony as an abomination, a violation of the natural order that should be eliminated. Others saw hope, proof that the barriers between species were not as absolute as believed. Scientists clamored to study the child, to understand how it existed and what it meant for the future of life itself. But it was the reaction from unexpected quarters that proved most significant. Young Zarathi, those who had been born into their predetermined roles without choice, saw in Harmony a symbol of possibility. If a human and a Zarathi could create new life, if love could overcome biological impossibility, What else might be achievable? The revolution started small. Zarathi younglings began questioning their assigned functions. Some refused their predetermined breeding partners, insisting on the right to choose. Others abandoned their designated roles to pursue interests that served no efficient purpose. Art, music, philosophy, pure research driven by curiosity rather than directive. "You've destroyed us," Vargoth accused during one of his increasingly desperate communications. The perfect order of Zarathi society, maintained for millennia, crumbling because of one hybrid child. "Not destroyed," Zarathin corrected, holding Harmony while the child played with patterns of light between its fingers. "Transformed. Evolution was never meant to stop, Vargoth. We simply forgot that in our pursuit of perfection." The changes weren't limited to Zarathi society. Humanity, too, found itself reconsidering fundamental assumptions. If love could create life between species separated by evolution and light years, what other connections might be possible? Research into consciousness, into the nature of life itself, accelerated. The old boundaries between us and them began to blur. Harmony grew rapidly, displaying abilities neither species possessed alone. The child could interface with Zarathi crystal technology through touch, understanding and manipulating complex systems intuitively. But Harmony also showed human creativity, solving problems in ways no Zarathi would consider, finding joy in simple discoveries that efficiency-minded crystal beings would have dismissed. "Look, Mama," Harmony called one day, the child's voice carrying both human inflection and Zarathi harmonics. The 3-year-old had figured out how to make the station's crystalline walls display stories, not through any programmed interface, but by somehow convincing the crystals themselves to cooperate. "That's impossible," Thexara muttered, watching the walls shimmer with images of Harmony's imagination. "That word has lost much of its meaning lately," Zarathin replied with what humans would recognize as maternal pride. Marcus entered the room, returning from another joint human-Zarathi military exercise. These had become increasingly common as the two species learned to combine their strengths. "What has our little miracle done now?" "Made friends with the walls," Harmony announced proudly. "They were lonely, so I taught them how to play." The adults exchanged glances. Zarathi technology wasn't sentient, couldn't be lonely. Yet the walls continued their display, showing patterns that seemed almost joyful. As Harmony grew, so did the child's impact on both civilizations. Other couples, human and Zarathi, began forming bonds. Not all resulted in children. Harmony remained unique in that regard, but the connections themselves began reshaping society. The rigid efficiency of Zarathi culture softened, allowing for innovation and individual expression. Human society gained new perspectives on consciousness and the underlying patterns of reality. "We've started something we can't control," Marcus observed one evening as they watched Harmony play with both human children and young Zarathi in the station's integrated education center. "All the best things in life are beyond control," Zarathin replied. "You taught me that." The opposition hadn't disappeared. Purist factions in both species continued to advocate for separation, for a return to the old ways. But they were increasingly outnumbered by those who saw in Harmony's existence a path to something greater than either species could achieve alone. The day Harmony turned 5, delegations from across the galaxy gathered for a celebration that had become an unofficial holiday on many worlds. The child who shouldn't exist had become a symbol of possibility itself. "Do you think they understand?" Zarathin asked, watching their child interact effortlessly with beings from a dozen different species. "What they represent?" "Probably not," Marcus admitted. "To Harmony, this is just normal. A universe where impossible things happen every day, where love matters more than logic, where life finds a way regardless of what the rules say it should do." The universe as it should be, Zarathin murmured. Ambassador Chen approached them, her face showing the satisfied smile of someone who had bet on the right side of history. The Federation Council has voted. The Hybrid Rights Act passed overwhelmingly. Any children like Harmony will have full citizenship and protection under galactic law. Children like Harmony? Marcus repeated. You think there will be others? I know there will be, Chen replied. 3 more human Zarathi couples have reported pregnancies. Whatever barrier prevented cross-species reproduction, Harmony's existence seems to have convinced the universe to reconsider. Zarathin's form shimmered with patterns of joy and wonder. Life finds a way. Speaking of which, Chen continued, the Zarathi Progenitor Council has officially recognized you as Queen Emeritus. They can't endorse your choices, but they're no longer calling for your termination. Progress. I have no interest in their titles, Zarathin said. I have everything I need. As if summoned by the conversation, Harmony ran over, a crown of light patterns floating above the child's head, a trick learned from some photonic visitors. Mama, Papa, look! I'm a queen like Mama! You're whatever you choose to be, Marcus told the child, lifting Harmony up. That's the gift we gave you, choice. And what do you choose to be today? Zarathin asked. Harmony considered this seriously, prism eyes shifting through thoughtful patterns. Today I choose to be me! The simple declaration carried more weight than the child could know. In choosing to simply be themselves, Harmony embodied the revolution their existence had sparked. Not human, not Zarathi, but something new and wonderful and entirely their own. Years passed. Harmony grew, as did the changes their existence had catalyzed. The rigid categories that had defined galactic civilization for millennia continued to blur and blend. New forms of art emerged from the fusion of human creativity and Zarathi precision. Scientific breakthroughs came from combining intuitive leaps with crystalline logic. And throughout it all, love, that inefficient, illogical, impossibly powerful force, continued to find ways to transcend every barrier placed before it. Marcus and Zarathin aged at different rates, something they had always known would be a challenge. But they faced it as they had everything else, together, with hope, and with the knowledge that what they had created would outlast them both. Do you regret it? Marcus asked one day, his hair now more silver than dark, while Zarathin remained unchanged by time. Everything you gave up? I gave up nothing, she replied, watching through the viewport as Harmony, now a young adult, led a diplomatic mission to mediate between 2 species who had been enemies for centuries. I gained everything, a life measured not in efficiency or predetermined purpose, but in moments of joy, discovery, and love. You showed me that existence could be more than mere survival. And you showed me that impossible is just another word for hasn't happened yet. They stood together, human and Zarathi, watching their impossible child change the galaxy, one connection at a time. Harmony had become a bridge between worlds, a living testament to what could be achieved when love overcame logic, when connection mattered more than convention. The universe, it turned out, had been waiting for someone to prove that its rules were more like suggestions, that life was far more creative and adaptable than anyone had dared to believe. It had taken a queen willing to abandon her throne for love and a human soldier who saw strength in vulnerability to show the way. Their legacy lived not just in Harmony, but in the thousands of connections that followed, in the new understanding between species, in the recognition that diversity was not weakness, but the greatest strength of all. The child who had been called an impossibility had become the foundation for a new possible future. As the stars wheeled overhead, constant yet ever-changing, Zarathin hummed the first song she had ever created, the one Marcus had taught her to play on that distant day when everything had begun to change. Harmony heard it from across the station and hummed along, the sound carrying through crystal and air alike, a melody that belonged to no one species but to life itself, endlessly creative, endlessly surprising, endlessly beautiful in its defiance of every limitation placed upon it. The alien queen, who had once taunted human fertility, had discovered something far more profound than genetic efficiency. She had discovered that true strength lay not in perfection, but in the courage to embrace the beautiful chaos of life, love, and the impossible children they could create together. And in that discovery, two species found their future.